All right, fantastic. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zill. It's great to have you all back here again with us today. We've been getting some real proper Toronto weather in terms of all the heat and stuff, and I have been melting, and I'm not a fan of melting. That's not the TF I'm here for, so I've been a little bit annoyed with that, but that's how weather goes. I'm joined by my co-host K-Libra. How are you doing, K-Libra?
I think melting is okay sometimes.
It can be, but I don't know. Sometimes it can be cool, but
Alex Mack, I don't know. You could call it whatever, but that's melting.
Yeah, I guess that is melting. It's not that I'm opposed to it. It's not in my top 20. You know what I mean?
Is it because it's boring or something?
It's not that it's boring. I think it can be actually pretty dynamic as a superpower.
Well, you could be because the T1000 is that.
Yeah, it is.
That's why it's cool.
It is cool.
Yeah.
But just sometimes I don't want to melt.
And
sometimes
subscribing to our Patreon is cool too.
I mean, sure, it is. That is cool too, actually.
Yeah.
That helps us get people like David Mattingly.
Yeah, because lend us some cred, lend us some notability. Just give us something to say. Yes, we have people who believe in what we're doing, and we have something decent going on. And yeah, you could speak with us, and it'll be a good time. Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
It's like being in the Patreon server is a good time too.
It is, and who knows? Maybe the more patron funding we get, the more the likelihood increases that you can come to MFF with me in December.
That would be nice.
That would be pretty
how
cool.
I can do that.
Pretty cash money, I would say.
Actual cash money.
Yeah, actual cash money.
Like and subscribe and all that stuff too. And I'll start saying it because it's so easy to forget, I guess.
I know. Well, apparently the YouTube algorithm really likes it when you do that. I've heard, so,
oh my god. It'll keep people on YouTube listening forever.
And ever. But not Spotify. Spotify doesn't do that.
Spotify is appreciated. Thank you, Spotify, for keeping things simple.
Yes, I appreciate how easy it is to upload episodes of Spotify. This is not an ad for Spotify. I don't actually like them as a company, but, thank you for that. So,
yeah. You praise the good things.
Yeah, exactly. And you poo-poo the bad ones.
Speaking of the good things, we have a special guest today again.
Yeah. So, I'm really excited to have her on. Wheatart, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello. I have never done a podcast before, so we'll see how this goes. But I am Wheatart. I've also been known on the internet as Doodlier before, but Wheatart is my main thing. What else do I say?
I mean, anything you'd like to share. Maybe, I'd love to hear more about how you kind of got into the fandom and found this interest or fascination or what have you with transformation art.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm a fairly new artist in transformation niche. It actually started, we did on Tumblr, we did an Animorphs mini bang. We had a bunch of writers and we had a bunch of artists come together, and they wrote some really cool short stories. And then we, as the artists, we would illustrate scenes from the stories. And while we were all talking about that, one of my now friends, their name is Seraphel, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but I wasn't sure what the difference was between TF and transformation. And they explained to me TF is, I think, from my understanding, and I think from their understanding, TF is kind of the more kinky side of it, whereas transformation is just the love of transformation. And so, there's that actual difference.
Oh, the friend mentioned it.
Oh,
yeah.
But
That's really interesting.
Who told them that?
I've never heard it described that way.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well, and because I knew there was the kinky side of things, and I guess as an artist, I've always called myself kind of kink adjacent, because
right,
I'm not drawing with the intention of kink.
Right.
But if somebody, if they're commissioning me and they're enjoying it for that, go right ahead. Just keep me out of it.
Yeah.
But no, it was interesting because she explained. I say she. I don't know if it's a she or he. They explained the difference to me and just how there is a couple sides. There's the family friendly version, and then there's the after dark version. So
that is really. I've never heard someone describe the two as separately, and I guess I mean, at least internally, a lot of folks in the like TF community, transformation community, whatever. I guess we do use TF as a shorthand, as a way to kind of like signal what these spaces are about. But I've always seen that as kind of an all-encompassing thing. Although I can see why someone would say, well, if I'm just talking about it as transformation versus, you know, whatever internet colloquial term is, makes it separated in some way. Although I don't know, I do feel like they are basically the same thing at the end of the day.
I've seen no distinguishing difference. It's people just use it as shorthand because they like using fewer syllables. Which is true.
I mean, we've it's funny. Yeah, it's funny because we've actually had this debate before where like I'll give you an example. So I'd write an outline or something, and I'm just using TF all the way through. And you'd be like, you can also say transformation. Like, that is a valid substitute.
when everybody, like, there's been so many conversations I've had with people, and they'll just be like, so the TF and this, and the TF and is good. And man, when you TF and the TF and the TF, and I'm like, you have different words you can use. It just it doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
Yeah.
So I had this conversation, and that's why I think it's really strange that somebody went and said, "Oh, these are the two different kinds." There are not.
Yeah. Well, and I've assumed that they're slightly different, mostly because Fur Affinity has two separate categories. They have a transformation category, and then they have the TF/TG. So I'm assuming there's something.
That is a good point though, because they do have two different categories on FA.
That's because TFTG.
They don't write it as TFTG together. They do a TF/ and then a TG.
Yeah, but that's only ever used for when both are concluded, so they did it wrong.
I mean, Fur Affinity doing something wrong is basically,
I'm telling you, it's
the sky is
blue.
The sky is blue, the grass is green, and Fur Affinity has screwed something up. You know?
It sounds convenient, and it sounds like, oh yeah, you know that would be nice little code. No, I'm telling you, that's a mistake.
I mean, it took them like how many years to implement actual species, like an actual definitive list of species.
Scrolling through that list is a pain sometimes.
Yeah. Although I'm glad it exists now, because it means there's actually a dedicated space for Lombax TF, which, you know, obviously is very important and dear to my heart.
Yes.
Other.
What is Lombax?
So Lombaxes are a species from the video game series Ratchet and Clank.
Okay.
And that's the name of the species that he is, and that's my main zone is Lombax. Gotcha. So I've joked before that at least 15% of all of the transformation art in Fur Affinity under the Lombax tag is because of me, and that is a real fact. So I'm very much repping that.
Nice.
It's like me, and then there's this one other person who continually commissions stuff of like him turning into Rivet, who's one of the characters, who's a Lombax, and then like a scattering of other things. But it's like those two, and then like other, which is very funny to me. So
that is funny.
Yeah, but is there? I haven't looked. Is there an actual? It's like actual Lombax?
Yes, no, there is. They've implemented it.
Wow.
When they did the actual overhaul, they put that in as a species, and it's a very extensive list that they put in now. So
because they have like the real animals, they have the mythical creatures, they have fandom specific animals, which is like anything out of video games, and then I think they have I can't remember what they call it, but it's like specific species that were created by artists. So like the protogens would be one that goes on there. And that's different from like canon stuff. I guess it's got its own canon now, but like the difference between like a AAA studio versus one artist.
Versus circles or whatever. And then they also have the legacy tags for, you know, if people didn't move their stuff over from the other, it stays at least there. But yeah,
people keep it tight, so I can see how things just get around, because I feel like I shouldn't know about any of these, but here they are. They make it. I don't know, looking for it, it finds me.
Yeah. But anyways, enough about me and Lombaxes. We're here to chat about your stuff. And I'm definitely curious to talk to you a little bit more about some of the anatomical stuff, because in terms of like your body of work, you're clearly an artist who tries to pay special attention to like anatomy and within transformation. And so I was curious to hear a little bit more as to like what initially got you on that kind of focus, and what you find are the most like fascinating or like difficult changes to depict.
I guess this jumps in a little bit too, because I found out about the community through my friend and through the Animorphs mini bang. but I think I really started picking up with the commissions. I had been doing some Animorphs fan art, and I did a sequence of mid-morph portraits of each of the main 6 cast with like them mid-morphing between their battle morph. And I had somebody reach out to me. They really liked my Animorph stuff, and they were going to do a tabletop role-playing game, and they wanted to know if they could use that art. And I was like, well, this is actually, like, because it's Animorphs fan art, I don't know how you can use it and make money off of it. So they commissioned me to make some original characters and do a similar setup. Animorphs is definitely the through line in pretty much all my art. There is...
Yeah.
And what going back to what you said about, like, the anatomy, you read the books... And one of the things that drove me nuts, my knees shifted directions, and I'm like, that's not how it works! And if you actually look at an animal skeleton, it's like, they do have knees, they're just not where we expect them to be. And so what we assume are the knees, and these were books written in the 90s, so I'm not going to be too hard on them, because it's like, they were researching what they could, and I learned so many animal facts because of those books. Like, it's a form of, I guess, edutainment, but, like, you're educated. Like, that was half the fun of the books, is you get to learn all these new animal facts. Like, polar bears have hollow fur is one of my favorite facts. So you're learning all this stuff, but then, yeah, like, the knees shifting directions, it's like, that's not how it works.
Not quite.
And I love the covers, but there are also a couple that are very anatomically incorrect. I think the one that I'm thinking of right off the bat is there's the cover where Rachel is morphing to a bear. And she's got human bear shoulders, and bears don't actually, like, their shoulders, because the way that shoulders sit on human beings versus the way they sit on animals is different. So bears, proportionally to humans, are actually very close, except for the shoulders. The shoulders sit behind instead of directly under the neck and directly off to the side. But if you look at that cover, she's got these big man shoulders, and it's like, that's not quite right. So I think there was this... Well, yeah. But there was this passion for, like, okay, how does the anatomy actually work? How do I transform a human anatomy? And how do I use those base templates that, like, because there are things that cross over between humans and animals.
Yeah.
You see the fact that, like, we do have heels, they're just in different places. You look at, I think, one of the ones I was looking at, I was studying kangaroos, and their hands, they have 5 fingers, or digits, just like we do, but, like, they don't have thumbs in the same place, and it became really fun to just see how things lined up and how they didn't, and how you'd transform it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really cool. Like, I didn't know that fact about the bear shoulders, actually. So that's, like, news to me, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's really good for me to know. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said around looking at, different skeletal structures or musculatures and seeing, like, not only, like, how does one person go from one to the other, but how do you depict that mid-stage in a way that makes sense? And I know that, sometimes folks say, like, well, if it's TF, you have a little bit of leeway with the anatomy. But as we've kind of said, I think, in previous episodes, I mean, sure, you can use that excuse, because it is kind of an excuse, but if you actually try to find that alignment between the two, it makes a lot of difference in terms of how the piece itself actually looks at the end of the day.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as interesting if you kept trying to keep the human placement of things between the forms. And if you are going to do that, then you're going to have to figure out different interactions anyway, which means you would still have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, it's just going to look wrong.
Yeah, the biggest thing I learned as an artist is you need to know the rules so that you can learn how to break them effectively.
Yeah.
Because there is, and this is where I do want to give some room and some leeway, there is a difference between horror transformation. I've never watched the movie, but I've seen the scene with, like, I think, is it American Werewolf in London, where it's got the really drawn out prosthetics that they use? So that's one that leans into the horror, and if you go really anatomical, then you can definitely play with the horror. But there is also the stuff where like you're playing with more aesthetics. So like one of the things I don't do, and this is just a personal choice. I know that a horse has like a single digit for their hoof, like, and so technically it's just one finger lengthening into their hoof. I don't really care for that aesthetically speaking. I know how it works, and I've done the research. But it means then I figure out, okay, how do I want to do it in a way that I like more? And like personally, I've kind of like the nails all like fusing together, and then you can still see the fingers underneath until it becomes a full hoof. But
so there's validity to the fusion finger thing, because a friend of mine who also really likes horse transformation found out that horses apparently did start with more digits.
Oh yeah, if you're talking about prehistoric horses,
yeah, they just eventually, ended up needing only the one. So we have what we have. You could argue that it's pretty much the same sort of thing, and it looks generally better to me too. It's a mood thing, but yeah, aesthetics matter. You could do the anatomy thing, and you could still have like a few things, a few touches that just make you feel like at least you like what you're looking at.
Yeah.
For instance, snakes. A lot of people like to do the thing where it's like, oh, because the tailbone, this is the natural extension, and blah, blah, blah. And then they always make the legs and the arms just kind of shrink and shrivel away. That never looks good to me.
It can work. I mean, I've played with both.
Yeah.
But you're right. Is there's the one where like the hands and feet kind of shrink into the snake. There's also the one where the legs just kind of twine together, and it's like, all right, that's your snake now. But
there's a third one. But there's a third one that
What's the third one?
Haven't you seen me do it? The idea that I had that looks best to me and also makes sense is having the tail grow out, expand, and as the body is lengthening and expanding, it's just kind of taking the legs along with it. So the width of the tail and the body expanding is just kind of like molding it in as it's like passing and forming.
See. Yes.
Which means that you don't have to have the legs like twirl around if you don't want to. Huh?
It's a midpoint between the two approaches.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, and then you don't have to have like these pathetic little ligaments just kind of like get drawn in.
I have seen with snakes, especially one of the fun ones I've seen. And I think it's just the play of like the body lengthening is you have it's between the hips and the rib cage, and that part starts lengthening, but so like they'll be standing up and all of a sudden they've got, it almost looks like an extra stomach, but it's just like that extra coil, or they'll have their neck suddenly like stretch and like fold backward and forth in on itself, which is really fun. I think that's a really fun way of doing it too. I will say,
100%. I love that.
This is something for people commenting on art. If you're gonna get into semantics, you cannot like how somebody draws something, but please don't sit there and say, well, actually, the anatomy works like this, so your art looks cool, but that was done wrong. It's like, this,
you have,
to be fair, transformation doesn't actually exist, so we're all making it up as we go along. There are more people that are more accurate and people that are less accurate.
They just can't help themselves.
You activated Libra. He very strongly agrees with you on this, for the record. Yeah, but go ahead.
You don't know why. I once did an owl transformation sequence, and because I wanted to see it done in a sequence, I was thinking, what if like part way I just excuse the 180 turn of the head, And I got so much flack just for that, and they were just accusing me of doing it for shock value and how it could have been so much better, and all this other things, and I'm like, wow, leave me alone.
Or it's like if you want it done that way, do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
It's specifically, unless you're paying me and telling me how you want me to do it, then I'm going to do it the way that I'm enjoying.
Exactly.
I've also been asked to alter a commission.
Oh my god.
By somebody else.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Okay, to be fair, I've had a couple people that are like, well, how about you do this? And I'm like, this is dumb. And I'm like, well, you didn't pay for it, so like the commissioner gets what they want, not you.
My favorite example is like there was the Vaporeon you did recently, and then people were like, well, what if you did Sylveon instead? And it's like, okay, are you paying me for that?
It's like, my commissions
no.
are open, here you go. Like, if you want that, go ahead.
Yeah.
Or something that's somewhat related is the image looks cropped. Can I see the full version?
And it's like, no, that's it. That's it.
That's what it is.
That's what you get.
Yeah.
So yes, the level of entitlements with people, and they're there's a few that really want to steer what people make.
Yeah.
And it's very selfish, and it's very, very myopic, and
and that's how you lose artists in the fandom, frankly. I mean, this is a completely side tangent, but like we've seen time and time again how like people get like burnt out because it's like, oh, I'm trying to like deliver towards what people want to see, or like I'm trying to like figure out what is it that like people are really into right now, so I'm like crafting my art around that, and inevitably you get a lot of creative like burnout because you're just trying to satisfy someone who isn't you. And like at the end of the day, as you've said before, like sometimes you need to have a bit of contempt for the audience in the sense that you need to create what your vision is, and then the people who like that will come. But like you have to actually be like indulging yourself.
Like the fact that my career, the fact that I'm working full time as an artist right now, really started because people saw my Animorphs fan art and they're like, "Yes, I want that," and it's kept going. I have not had to advertise that I'm open for commissions for over a year, which is wild to me. Like I've had. Now I have a couple people that they come back regularly, and I have one that's come back so regularly. I love them. I have called them my patron of the arts because they are like funding my my livelihood, and it's so cool. But if you have a passion for something, and if you let that passion show, people react to passion. Yeah.
No, 100%. I completely agree.
As I'm getting overexcited while we're talking.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's interesting too because I've noticed that a lot of your work definitely focuses more on like feral animal TF, as I like to call it, like, you know, like just normal animals.
Yeah.
And I guess I was curious to know, is that linked at all to like the easier through line in terms of looking at anatomical changes between like a person to an animal versus like a person to an animal/human hybrid, or is there another reason why your interest kind of stems in that direction?
I mean, I'm gonna blame Animorphs again because.
Okay, that's fair.
a lot of my art, especially for me, because I know transformation has a lot of meanings for different people. For me, it's always been a type of kind of a power fantasy. Like, how cool would it be to turn into a northern goshawk, which is a really cool bird of prey I learned about. They can fly through the forest. They're really good at like aerial maneuvers. How cool would it be to turn into one of those and go fly around? Or how fun would it be to, like, I mean, that was the other thing I loved about the Animorphs, is you get this experience as the animal. You get the instincts, you get the, you get to just be the animal, and it's like, so sometimes it's like, all right, you're the king of the hill, you're the tiger, the top predator. Sometimes you're the prey animal, you're like really alert and aware of everything, and just how cool that is. And I love anthros too, they're really fun. But I don't know, there's just something that power fantasy, that superpower of being able to turn into animals and being able to experience life through different eyes.
No, that's really interesting. I think, like, definitely, I mean, at least personally, my tastes have definitely changed over time, but my stuff definitely started with feral animal TF, so, like, I completely get where you're coming from on that front. I think that, especially because, like, I mean, all of this is, like, at the end of the day, like, fantasy, fictional, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Being able to, like, make something that feels, like, a bit more grounded in reality, per se, in terms of, like, well, we're not breaking the rules that much. You know, we're doing this wild thing, but not, like,
I'm not
extreme,
a pink fluffy
like,
wolf or something.
Yeah, I'm not a... Yeah, you know, like, I can see why people enjoy that. Oh, of course. No, I've become many a pink wolf in my day, and I love that. But no, I do get what you mean on that front. I just always find it interesting in particular because a lot of artists do tend to have like a preference for doing like feral versus anthro, I find.
Yeah.
But I think it's more uncommon to see someone who only does feral animal TF versus like some anthro, or like only doing anthros, and I don't know why that is. Maybe this is because of the like connection the niche has to like furry, which obviously has a heavy emphasis on anthros.
Yeah.
But,
No, I think you're right 100%, because a lot of people, especially with furries, I mean, I have a depiction of a polar bear Sona, which I
Yes.
really made because I joined Fur Affinity. It's like, well, I guess I should. I also have a dragon form, but I'm also somebody. I think the other thing is, I don't want to be tied to one's like. It's like, no, I've got multiple forms. Like that's the whole
you're
fun about
shapeshifter.
shape-shifting as a power. It's like, oh yeah, no, I can turn into a polar bear and a dragon and how about a cougar and a maned wolf and a barn owl? And it's like, yeah, okay.
yeah.
But
The U
I
is
think-
never static.
Yeah. And if
Yeah,
you're gonna have
I really enjoyed
shape-shifting
that.
as a power, like, I would not want to turn into just one specific animal, I'll be honest. I want all the animal
Yeah.
powers.
Yeah, because then like you don't just become the same thing all the time, you know,
Yeah.
like.
I think that's
Yeah.
been the other really fun thing with my art, especially because I've started doing these character auctions of these much longer
Okay.
comics. Because to be fair, it can be expensive to pay for the comics. They're each page, because they take a lot of time and effort.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and you deserve to be paid for the work you're putting in. You
Yeah.
know, like.
Especially if I'm doing something very specific to what the client wants. But it has been fun doing these auctions because there are so many cool animals in the world. I think that's the other thing. Like, you asked why I do feral. There are so many species out there, and like, this has given me a chance to explore ones that aren't normally commissioned. I've got a couple. I haven't posted them yet. Like, I just have a lionfish sequence that I've got up for preview right now. But I've also got a giant eland, which is a type of antelope, and it's got really specific cool horns. It's got interesting face shape and like the markings. I wanted to try an aardvark specifically because I saw this video of this aardvark that was like sniffing a pumpkin, and just watching the way the nose moved and the way that it's got these little, they're not quite talons, but they're like really long, thick fingernails, and it was like, okay, I want to try that out. That looks cool. So half the fun is just exploring how many cool species there are on the planet.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I did think commissions would be a good way to force me into just practicing things that I normally wouldn't do. Some people really push it though, so it's been a mixed bag with that.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that like when it comes to like some of the auction stuff, it definitely helps to like have the scope narrowed down already, and then give like obviously there's a bounds of like, you know, you're putting in your character, what have you, but then you're already kind of setting up like, this is the progression that you're getting.
Yeah.
It's not changing, you know, like I think that's a good way to kind of strike that balance, and also still get to do like things that might be creatively sort of challenging but also interesting.
Yeah. And it has been nice being able to explore things, because I tried a couple myself. I did a kangaroo and a giraffe, and I just kind of, one of them I did put myself into it, and then another one I just put a random character, and I was like, well, I'm making these comics anyways because I'm exploring something. Like, if somebody really likes that animal, might as well give them the opportunity. I'm able to get paid, and while it's not as much as like my regular commission rate, like, I'm still getting paid for doing something that I'm making anyways, and it's kind of that win-win situation. And they are single
absolutely.
one-off commission. Like, the your character here's that I do, it's like, okay, I'm doing this one, and then that one's done, and I'm moving on to the next one. Like, I'm not repeating the characters. It's like, no, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
I got too many I got too many animals to draw.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When it comes to, I know we've been spending a lot of time talking about feral animals, but I guess like there have been like a few like glancing examples, I think, of you kind of tinkering with that, like for example when you've depicted yourself as like the polar bear. And I'm curious, like when it comes to anthro characters, how different do you think their anatomies would be from like humans and their animal counterparts? Is there a right way in your mind of how like these sort of hybridized anthropomorphic animal characters should look?
Honestly, I think that's half the fun of the anthros. Like, I haven't delved into it as much, but like one of the cool things is really, it's like, all right, how do I combine human and animal in a way that feels true to both, but also maybe explores. And so that's where I've seen really cool versions. Like Zootopia, their animals are flat-footed. They're what is it, plantigrade? That's the term. They're plantigrade.
Yeah.
But the way they did it is they set it up so that the animals can go on all fours, and they like their character design. Versus you have Beastars, maybe, I think, is the one where it's literally a human with an animal head. I could be wrong. I don't know much about the anime.
That is Beastars.
But and I think there's fun in exploring both, like, because I've personally liked having more realistic animal, like leaning more to the animal for the feet. So whether that's digigrade with polar bear, it's actually really fun because they technically have like a similar setup leg-wise that we do. I think they're plantigrade too. But like they've got these giant like paw mitts for their hands, and I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna make those a little bit more human for ease of dexterity. Another good example, if any of you have ever read the webcomic Skin Deep by Corey Bing, I highly recommend it. It's a great series.
I don't think I've heard of that one before.
Probably not.
It's the premise is that there's humans who are masquerading. They have medallions that allow them to pass as humans, but a lot of them are actually mythological creatures. So like,
wait a minute.
Oh
my god. I think, maybe this is the main character like a sphinx or something?
Yes.
Okay, so then,
Griffins, sphinx, satyrs, fawns, all that
my
kind
partner, my partner got stuff from that artist, from that book, and so she's got like, I think she has like a sphinx pin or something like that, or actually has like the necklace with the medallion.
I've got the bugbear medallion, and I've got a griffin medallion, and I actually turned them into earrings because otherwise I kept when they were on my keys, I kept losing them, so I turned them into earrings. But that one's really fun because the characters with the medallions, and it's magic specific, but they can shift between full form and mid form, and they can kind of pick how they want to make their mid form. So if they want it to be more bestial, they can, or if like for a Pegasus who can't talk in full form, they adjust the shape of their face so that they can still talk. But the characters kind of get the ability to kind of waffle between any of the positions on that, versus something like a satyr where it's like they have goat legs and they have horns and ears, so they can be full form pretty much all the time because they're not really they don't have to worry as much. But I always love that idea of like there's a sliding scale and you pick what works best for your character.
Yeah.
If you want to see a really cool example of that, there's an artist online that goes by Beast of Oblivion, and they have
familiar.
These characters. Yeah, maybe you heard of them. I don't know, but they have these characters that turn into these like almost serpentine, like dragon-like monsters. And there's just a bunch of art of these characters in a bunch of different mixes of the forms, where like the top of their head is human and the bottom is like monster jaw, or just like most like human torso with like a serpentine body, all kinds of things like that, and it's really cool. So I always appreciate that sort of thing.
I mean, half the fun about transformation is mashing two things that wouldn't normally go together, right? So I think furry is just kind of like a culmination of a side of transformation. Or anthro,
it sort of is, and it's it sort of is, and it sort of isn't.
Fair.
because like monsters are not furry.
That's true. Yeah, I don't think anyone would call a werewolf a furry necessarily.
They would.
Although people can use that as a sub, obviously.
I think people will be quicker to assert that now.
Yes, I guess that's true. In the past, it wouldn't have been.
Yes.
Like even like back in like the 90s, like even at the start of the internet, I think people would say, no, that's not furry. That's a monster.
Our distinguished mythological creatures versus your base furry, and it's like, no, they're it's furries.
Yeah, like furries adopt these things or they integrate them in some ways, but like
or
monsters and furries are two different things.
Yeah.
Which is why like the Beast of Oblivion stuff that I mentioned as an example, or like Skin Deep, Skin deep, for instance, could count as furry because you could have a furry form.
Yes.
Theoretically, if they wanted to do that, but that's not really what it is. That's like one aspect leaking into another, and these are like little concepts.
Yeah. From what I've seen, Corey is a
so
happy furry, but...
Yeah. I'm curious then, so like when you see artwork that doesn't really adhere to the proper anatomy of an animal, how do you like react? Like I know we kind of touched on the start about like, hey, you know, maybe don't be shitting people's comments, but I'm curious to like how do you feel about like the traditional it's a TF sort of excuse, and like how like you react to pieces when you do see them kind of engaging with that?
I think a lot of it depends on is it are they using it's like TF isn't real as an excuse, or because there's times where it's like, well, that's just bad anatomy, like I don't care how you turn them into one another, but it's like that's just, it looks bad. But I'm not going to say that to the artist unless they're asking for critiques, because it's like that's not really my place to say. If they're happy doing what they're doing, there's stuff that I will secret, like inside I'll probably sit there and judge it, but I do think you have to be very careful about what you're actually saying to people, because it's like, okay, is this helping them to grow, or is this just you slamming your opinion on their face and saying, well, therefore my way is the right way? Because I think one of the things I have to acknowledge is my perspective on anatomy is only one of many. Now, if I was a scientist, that would be a different matter entirely. But as an artist, I get a little chance to have some creative liberties, and I think everybody should have that creative liberty. Even if I look at your art and I might be judging you a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like over the years, I think proper critique really comes in the form of an exchange.
Yeah.
A bit of a conversation, short or long. So that way you figure out what they're going for versus
helping
what
them
you
realize
think
their
it should
vision.
be.
Yeah.
Yes. So when people say when people ask me sometimes, you know, how does this look? I will often tell them if I think it looks fine or whatever, but I'll always ask them like that, like what are you going for?
Yeah. That's
because important. I could either make somebody draw it the way I would like it, or I can help them figure out what they want to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't, because maybe they didn't really think that far ahead, or maybe they just don't grasp something yet. But yeah,
well, at different skill
where
levels, that's huge too. Because like you can have
skill
somebody
levels,
who's just learning, and it's like there's a lot they need to figure out, and so it's like, what's one thing that can help them? It's like they're not going to be at the same skill as somebody else. But what? Yeah. Now, that being said,
but there is just like speaking to them. I try not to insult people's intelligence, like if they don't know something.
Yeah.
Or I could tell somebody something is good, even though it's like at a certain level. You know, good is a spectrum too.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, I agree. Like just going off and saying like, "Hey, here's how you could have fixed everything you did in your comments." Yeah. Like, you know, I did have one of these like beyond parody comments a long time ago on something that I did, and it was simply something to the effect of something's really off about this, and I don't know what. That's pretty much what they said.
Yeah.
And then I asked them, nothing at all? You can't figure it out? There isn't anything? And they're just like, no, it just seems off. I'm like, thanks, you helped me. You helped me in absolutely zero way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just it's frustrating when that happens, because like obviously sometimes as an artist you might be like, oh, I'm like, you know, I'm looking at something, it looks kind of off, but like you said, sometimes if you actually have a conversation with someone else, it can be like, oh, you know, like for example, it might be posted by the time we post this, but like I was working on an art piece the other day and I was like, this face, you know, I don't really know what to do with it. It's like a forward face of a fox, but it's kind of like also like up, and I don't know how to do this. And you and Honeyberry did redlining for me, because you're like, yeah, maybe it would look like this or whatever, and like that helped because you had a conversation, and like that's when people grow as artists, not just coming up to them being like, yeah, that looks off, I don't know why, but yeah, I just figured I should tell you it looks bad. Like, okay, thanks, what am I supposed to do with this information, you know?
Or equally bad, no, you're doing the snout like this. Look, put the nostrils over here, put them this size, blah, blah, blah. Here, let me just draw it for you. Now follow this groundwork that I laid out for you.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Sometimes redlining is nice because as the artist, when you start going over somebody else's piece, you see, like, as you're drawing it, you're like, oh, that's what was pinging my radar or something. But making sure you're doing that specifically with friends and specifically with people who have asked for it, I think is important.
Well, I mean, that hasn't happened to me yet where somebody has just cold approached me with a red line on my own stuff. I am speaking, we're both speaking purely from, we're hanging out, we're making stuff, and one of us is like, I don't know what's wrong with this.
And then we're like, oh, okay, well, you know, maybe take a look. Although it's funny you say that because I've definitely had that happen to me before.
Yeah.
Yeah, just someone out of the blue being like, yeah, so I was looking at your piece and I thought it was kind of bad, and so here's a red line if you want to improve it, thanks. And I'm like, oh, okay, wow, thanks for presuming that. I feel like complete garbage.
Take it with the good intent it was meant, hopefully.
I don't know. It was that was a wild experience, but that was like, I don't even know how long ago that was now, like 8 years ago. I don't know. It was, anyways, neither here nor there.
Fair, yeah.
But. Yeah, it always matters in terms of, like, what the artist is actually looking for from a feedback perspective, and, like, I guess the gumption of some people, but, I don't know. In any case, though, I'm curious then if there are any species you think that are too complicated or difficult to properly portray in TF from an anatomical perspective. Like, are there any that you're like, you know what, there's just no real way for me to really portray this in a way that'll ever look both artistically correct and also be anatomically correct?
Now, this is one that I can draw, but it's because I've done lots of study. The one that bugs me when I see a lot of other people do it is polar bears.
Okay.
I think trying to find good art of polar bears that isn't just a white bear in a grizzly skin is so hard, because polar bears, especially, they have a much longer neck, and they've got they're one of my favorite animals, if you can't tell, but they've got this really elegant face, and, like, their nose has almost like, I would you call it like a Roman arch or whatever it is? They've got this beautiful shape to them, and it's very elegant, and grizzlies are gorgeous too, but they have a different build to them. And I think that's the big thing I've noticed is it's often the animal species that are very close that are the ones that get messed up the most frequently. Where you almost fall back on common tropes of the more popular animal when you're trying to do a slightly different species. Yeah. As far as ones that I've drawn, I think the weirdest one was doing a starfish. It was fun, but it was weird.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think I'm willing to try anything. That being said, insects kind of freak me out. They kind of...
That's fair.
I find them really creepy. So I'd be willing to try it, but I might also be squicking out the whole time.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, as someone who has enjoyed many a mosquito TF, despite not actually liking mosquitoes in real life, I get where you'd be coming from on that front. I actually find... at least on the mosquito friends, those are ones that actually can be pretty, like, nicely depicted in terms of, like, a transformation for one to the other from an anatomy perspective. The problem is just, like, the mouth and how it works, I think, in particular, like, freaks a lot of people out, especially 100%. If you're, like, depicting that towards the beginning with,
if
like,
they're
all
still
the
full-sized
suckers and stuff.
Human-sized and not, like, the size of a little period.
Yeah, exactly. Which... in my opinion, makes it even more interesting, but also, I wouldn't necessarily want to be a mosquito. So.
I mean, specifically mosquitoes?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen a mosquito. I've seen more spiders than I've seen mosquitoes.
So, I think, at least in terms of my fascination with them, it's definitely the mouth sucker and, like, how it looks. Like, if you really look at how they look... it's really weird. I think it's really cool. And again, it's like, I wouldn't necessarily well, okay, let me take a step back. I think it would be a cool TF to experience. I would also immediately want to go back for other reasons, but I find it's just something that's really cool, and like the whole like insect thing with the what's the word, like with the eyes and like the wings and like the body structure with like the three parts, like it's very cool to me, and like the extra limbs and all that good stuff.
One of the scenes that still stands out to me from the Animorphs books, and I plan at some point I actually want to do some illustrations from each book. I want to illustrate some of my favorite scenes, but one of the ones that still sticks out to me is Jake was morphing a dragonfly, and the first thing that changes are his eyes, and so he's got these giant dragonfly eyes, and so he can see everything as he's changing, and I still remember that scene where like the eyes pop and he's like, ah, and the other kids are like, ah.
That's fascinating.
There's a pretty gruesome but cool transformation in the first Onimusha game, where this lady turns into just an insect monster woman, and the way her eyes change is kind of like, it looks like they like bulge out for just a minute, but then they quickly kind of blend into being what they're supposed to be, and you see them grow and like wrap around the sides of the head. I'll show that to you.
Oh, that sounds.
I can show the people the clip too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think about insect transformations with that too. Although, if you want to be less squeamish about insects, and I forget where I heard this, but it was something like, insects are pretty much just living little robots.
Yes.
Because they got their little armor plating in the inner workings. So you could always just think of it that way.
I have tried drawing. I think it was I think the species is called three crane or thecrene. It's a D&D species that's an insectoid, and that one was interesting because I got to kind of look it up, and it's like, all right, so they're basically wearing armor. But other than that, I don't think I've done many insects, and I'd have to see how I feel about them.
There are a lot of pretty ones. There are jewel beetles as well, and there's also like mantids are pretty good because they're very weird, but the variety of them is interesting. And
a jumping spider would be cute.
Oh yeah,
jumping spiders, peacock spider. If you wanted that one too,
like
that one's also popular. Well, I think people would know that as a spider that seems approachable if they see it.
Yeah.
Sorry, the little the monkey neuron activated meme activated when you said it's a creature from D&D, so I had to look it up, and now I know what we're talking about, and they're really cool. I really like them. I like them a lot. I just didn't remember what their name was, but they're very visually interesting. I
will say, like, insect eyes are really pretty, like, especially when you get like those super macro photos of like the bees or ants or whatever, and you've got like the water drops on their eye, and it's like this fragmented crystal. That's really cool. But yeah, I think it's the mouth parts. It's mostly the mouth parts that are kind of creepy.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I don't know. I just find them. Marge Simpson with the potato. I just think they're neat.
Yep.
That's just me. I know that obviously we just spent a lot of time talking about anatomy, but I did also want to touch on something that we were chatting about before, and that's kind of how like a lot of formative media with like Superpower TFs was something that very much had an impact on you. And we already talked a little bit about like, the power fantasy element, but besides like Animorphs necessarily, where did that interest in sort of like superpower themed transformation come from like a media perspective?
Oh, well, and if you look back at like any like 90s, early 2000s media, we had such a selection. My favorites off the top of my head, first and probably most favorite is Beast Boy from the Teen Titans. He was so cool. It was so much fun. I'm like, yes, that's the power I want. Ben 10. I didn't watch it as much, but I still really loved the aspect of it. I also found out, so the studio that did Ben 10, they also did the show called Generator Rex. Have you ever seen that one?
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one's got transformation. It's a little bit more mechanical, but it's still like a really cool setup. So Ben 10 and Generator Rex were both animated by a company called Man of Action. And if Animorphs ever was to get an animated series, I'd want them to animate it because they know how to do transformations so well.
Yeah. They've had a lot of practice.
Yeah. I didn't watch them as much, but I mean, like, we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you had Gargoyles, you had... one of the ones I did actually go back and watch as I was older was American Dragon Jake Long. His first season dragon, I think, looked way cooler than his second season dragon. I like the Noodle Dragon, but it's like... He had a really cool design in the first one.
I'm still so sad. I'm still so sad what they did to him in the second season. Like, I understand at least, like, where they were coming from like, a cultural angle. I really do get it.
And the fact that his grandpa was an Asian dragon.
Yeah, but, like, aesthetically speaking, I'm like, come on, guys. We all know the first one looked better. Like, it's just... I don't know.
And then shows that have, like, dabbled in it. And some of these were, like, formative, and then some of these I came into as I was older. I quite liked, I mean, Danny Phantom. It's not quite transformation, but, like, when he's going ghost, there is that aspect.
Yeah.
Also, Steven Universe has done some really cool stuff. I love the fusions. The gem fusions was such a cool idea because that's my favorite idea. Like, you take two ideas and you smash them together, and what do you get?
Right.
And then the other one, Troll Hunters. Especially what they do to Jim at the very end of the series. It's like, whoa, okay, I'm digging that. And, I mean, you have Guillermo del Toro doing a kids show. It's like, okay. He knows what he's doing.
I mean, you know it's going to be good.
Yeah,
he knows what he's doing.
If you haven't seen Troll Hunters, don't watch the movie, just watch the series. But the series is great.
Yeah. That's a pretty good selection, I would say.
Yeah.
Also, it's all over kids' media. Like, Brother Bear.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and pretty much you have so many samples of Disney where it's like, oh, yeah, no, now you're this animal and you've got to go through the film as this animal. And it's like, as kids, how can we not be... saturated with transformation media? It's everywhere.
Yeah,
it's everywhere now.
And
90s
too.
80s and 90s.
Yeah. I'm just saying that it's a ubiquitous theme. I keep saying it because there are plenty of people that you will speak to in this fandom, and they will always feels for them like there isn't enough, and where can I find it? Where can I find more? Just watch things.
Yeah.
You will fall right into it.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Especially...
A couple weeks ago, I started... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say especially in kids' media. Because I watched a cool video, I think it was Transformation is a person, he does panels about, like, the history of transformation. And one of the things he talked about...
Bash. Yeah.
And one of the things he talked about was how... children's media, like, because it's such a good, it's a potent use of, it's a good storytelling device because you're letting your character experience the story through a different set of eyes. So it's all over kids media.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, if you don't like kids media, then it means that yes, you're going to be lacking for content. But it's not that it's not there. You just may think you're above the media that it's in.
No, you don't lack for content if you're not into kids' media either.
Fair.
Because the show that I was watching before, what I was going to mention before, started watching it a couple weeks ago. It's an incredibly messed up show to watch. And we're sitting there and we're getting through it. And I'm like, wow, this has a huge theme of, if you do this, you lose your humanity, and you see it happen, and you see the different results it can have. Yeah, over and over, and it's a clear and present threat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh wow, here it is in spades, woven into the narrative.
Yeah.
Shown as a spectacle and a consequence and everything, and I didn't even know.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
And even, like, I think there's, like, so many different other pieces of, like, obscure, or I guess obscure now, not obscure at the time, but obscure media that had it as, like, ever-present themes across, like, multiple, like, episodes, especially, like, when we talk about some of the episodic shows in the 90s. I mean,
Monster of the Week.
Katana showed us, Katana showed us this older show called Outer Limits, which was it was a redo of the show from the 60s and the 90s and 2000s, and, like, there's a bunch of TF in that show, and it's not a kids show. It's very much like, this was like seen as kind of almost prestige TV. You have like these famous actors in it. People got nominated from Emmys out of it, and transformation is an ever-present part of a bunch of different story threads in it.
Was it live action or animation?
Because, we... Sorry, say that again?
Was it live action or animation?
Yeah.
Oh, it's live action. Yeah, live action.
Never heard of The Outer Limits?
Nope.
It's very good. There was an episode... I don't want to actually say too much about some of these episodes because some of it is, like, spoiling it, but there's an episode about a guy who, is given a second chance at life, so to speak, and it involves some governmental experiments, and I'll leave it at that. And like, that is obviously very much a part of the storyline of that one.
Yeah.
People who are like trying to play God with like their cells, and that goes bad too. Like, there's so many different examples of it, and these topics are things that like you can appreciate them from just the level of like, oh wow, there's TF in it, but also you can appreciate from the angle of like, we're talking about really deep philosophical concepts right now through the lens of using transformation as a trope to tell a story. And I always find it interesting at all of the different ways that people have used it over time, especially because many of these people probably aren't necessarily in this space, so to speak, but definitely have at least a casual interest in it and have decided to deploy it as part of a way to tell whatever sort of broad stroke storytelling they're going for. Even like modern stuff, like there was an episode of Black Mirror, which has been spoiled a lot, and I'm not going to do that on this podcast, but there's an episode where it is used as a metaphor to talk about the exploitation of people at the hands of the media. And again, clearly whoever made it was interested in transformation as well, but that was not the point of the story. The point of the story was to talk about that exploitation and use transformation as a lens to funnel that story through to a very wide audience. Well, probably one of the widest ones you can have, being, the show is on Netflix.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I constantly think that when people say there's not enough, I'm like, I don't think you've done the looking that maybe you should have.
I've also heard apparently there's a new show that's out. Apparently I should look it up. It's called My Lady Jane.
Yes.
The funniest thing that everybody's been saying is like the trailers do not show that there's like a group of like transforming people, and it's like, oh, this is up my alley. I'm curious now.
Yeah.
As far as tropes go, though, I think one of my favorites is the idea of the beast within, and like your humanity. I'm rereading Dune right now, and one of the things they talk about is like, are you human? Because there's human beings, but like, what is humanity? Are you
right?
Or are you an animal that will gnaw its own hand off to get out of a trap? Like, which is really cool. I also love, I'm a huge fan of the Dresden Files. And they have the second book, Full Moon, deals with like every type of werewolf possible. And one of the things they deal with is this form of like that inner beast, and whether or not you let it out, and how it impacts what you do in day-to-day life. Yeah. So that's one of my favorite tropes too, that deals with transformation.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, as a fellow Dune enjoyer, there's also actual textual TF in that later on in the series if you follow along. It gets really esoteric. Yeah, weird is definitely a word you could use for it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to get to that book in the planned kind of movies they're doing, which is a shame. But also, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to be said about the content of Dune and how it reflects back. But again, transformation is a theme in those books too.
It's kind of cynical. If you don't have people working on it that actually want to see it because they see the value in it, you're not going to get it.
Yes.
Because I had to be told by Katena that in Hunger Games, people get turned into monsters.
Yes, and they cut it out of the movies, and I was devastated.
Yeah, and I think that's dumb because it would have been good.
Yes, because they in the text they're like, yes, these are the former people, the former contestants. Their bodies have been warped, and now they're these like grotesque mutant monsters. And of course, they took that out because.
Well, and now to be fair, I'm actually going to favor inside of the movie a little bit. It's something with the psychological horror specifically that works better in the written format, because you have Katniss realizing it's like, oh, like that's their hair, oh, that's their eyes, and like you see her kind of spiraling out of control. And with pacing for a film, it's like, I understand why they cut it. It would have been
Yeah, I mean,
interesting to have like human eyes, and it was also a really low light scene, so it might have been really hard to see. Like I think they did mention that the
yeah,
eyes were supposed to be human looking
human.
in the
Yeah,
movie, but you can't see it because it's too dark.
yeah, exactly.
You can do it.
Yeah,
I think-
I already wrote it out in my head how you could have done it anyway.
Yeah.
It really comes down to execution and if people
And
care
interest.
enough to do it.
And
That's it.
that clearly wasn't.
But
a
you can
priority.
do it, and it ain't that hard, and it wouldn't take that much time. I'm telling you.
Well, this also runs into the problem of Hollywood has decided that lighting is not a sexy thing to do anymore
Yes.
in film, and so we just don't employ gaffers to actually light scenes because they're unionized. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. I worked in film for a little bit, and I'm aware of some of the stuff, and it's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
you know. Oh man.
Give me
But
my Helm's
I guess
Deep
one of the
lighting
things
again.
I know, right? But one of the things I do think about sometimes is that, especially in like media, transformation is far more often posed as like a punishment or a thing that's like inflicted onto others instead of being channeled as a power. And I was curious if like why you think that is and how that contrary pull towards punishment contrasts with your interest in the empowerment angle.
Good question. I like that question. I think there's like benefits of both sides. I think the punishment, and I mean, you even see this in film, is
Right.
you need to look from a different perspective. Like, how often is it you are in a narrow-minded view, and we're gonna fix that. There was this old film I remember. This kid was a bully, and so he got turned into a sparrow so that he could kind of learn what it's like to be on the end of the bullied and to be on the end of the prey, and he has to like run away, and so I think that's one of the appealing aspects of punishment. I mean, there's the other whole kinky side too, where it's like,
Of course.
I guess would you call it an aspect of like BDSM?
It can be, yeah, like degradation and that
Yeah,
sort of stuff.
yeah.
Like it definitely is.
But as far as power fantasy goes, I guess it depends on what people are going into it for. Like, story-wise, I think there is power in that kind of punishment where it's like, all right, like, and perspective taking, which is so important in a film. And I think when it's more of a superpower, it can lose some of its impact, which is a shame because there's some really cool things to explore with superpower. I think Beast Boy, he's had a couple of times where, like, he's like, who even am I? Like, I can turn into all these animals, and like he questions his own identity. But maybe it just comes down to the fact that like conflict is more appealing. Conflict tells a better story than everything being hunky dory. So
Right.
yeah. I'm one of those weird people who also really likes Superman, even though he's got like a really healthy upbringing compared to Batman, who's got the dark and brooding story. But there's a reason that like Batman is more popular. Is there's aspects of tragedy, there's aspects of pain, and there's aspects of punishment that let us explore things in a way that we may not be able to in our real lives, or that give us catharsis because we're going through something so hard. I don't know if I'm selling the wish fulfillment side of it very much, but it's interesting to explore for sure.
Yeah.
The problem with wish fulfillment is that it really isn't a very critical thing when it's executed or when it's thought about. People have thought-terminating cliches that if you have your wish fulfilled, there's really nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
And then there are the people who get their wishes fulfilled and they think there's nothing else to talk about. It's very much like, if you get this done, these are the things that you would have to face. Yeah. Surely, you think your life would be easier if, this is a common one, a horse. I'd love to be a horse and just graze and run wherever I want. Really? Are you sure about that?
Prepare
well, you
to
could
be
have
an
that.
Absolute panic animal. And everything is around to
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you are not going to have it easy. And you're big and strong, but the moment one thing goes wrong in your body, everything else is probably going to go too.
Yeah.
It's a scary existence, but hey, you got what you wanted.
Yeah.
And like, even okay, the thing about Superman, an angle that I enjoy about him is that I don't think he needs to be like Batman, where he needs to be in a like great pain or anything like that. It really is like the the fact that he exists and the influence that he has on the world that he lives in, and him grappling with that too, since he was raised by humans as a human until he couldn't be that anymore.
Yeah.
So people would love to be Superman because Superman is a god in the universe. Superman is as strong as he needs to be.
Yeah.
He's his own deus ex machina, all that stuff. But that doesn't mean there isn't something to explore with him, because if he wants to be the things that he says, which is, a force for good justice, things that he believes in are good at least, how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
How do you deal with the fact that you actually cannot do everything?
Yeah.
He could do pretty much anything he wants, but not everything, and he still has some weaknesses. And it's and that's a way to just explore that kind of stuff as a superpower. You can find conflict if there is weakness, and there is weakness in kind of anything we can conceive.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if you say there is no weakness and there are no stakes, well then we're done here.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens with things like superpowers, and that includes turning into whatever you want.
Yeah.
See, building off of what you said, I really liked what you said there, because now it made me think, one of the things I actually do like about the power fantasy is you can really tell the good writers from the bad writers in power fantasy in terms of story. When I'm just drawing something just for the fun of it, that's different. But yeah, so a good writer can take something that is maybe a little overpowered, and they can get really creative with it, and that can be really cool. If you have something that's already a conflict in its own, or it's already a really powerful trope, you can be a great writer or a terrible writer, and it'll probably still hold up decently.
Yeah, the Batman has the opposite problem. Batman, you say people like him for his grit and everything like that, and that's fine. The thing I enjoyed about Batman was his humanity and his ability to be able to overcome anything, through force of will, through cleverness, things like that. And underlying all of that, there is a kindness that sometimes is also misguided, and that he battles with his own demons and stuff like that.
And sometimes it's overlooked.
I think that sometimes it's overlooked.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem with Batman these days is that Batman is pretty much now a god. And I could spend 2.5 hours explaining why, but if you can just take me at my word for the moment, he really just seems to be the linchpin, this necessary thing to exist, and I think that's really, really stupid, and it actually just kind of devalues him. I always enjoyed, for instance, when him and Superman finally came together, it's kind of how do I deal with this guy who could just flatten me because he feels like it?
Yeah.
I have an idea. And it's now we could either, here's how I level the playing field. And it's just so that's what makes Batman worth existing in a world like this.
Yeah.
Not, I am so smart, I have figured it out because I am paranoid and just clinically insane. And it's just, I think that superpowers and everything like that can have tons of angles to explore. I think being able to turn into anything you want can be explored in so many ways that you can't really figure it out. You know who's a good example of that? Mystique. You know Mystique from X-Men? Yeah. Her powers have very specific limitations.
They do, yeah.
She can't turn into anything that has too much more or less mass than she already has. She can mimic the appearance, but not so much the powers.
Yeah.
Also, the thing that makes her as effective a shapeshifter and a deceiver as she is that she's an actress. She was an actress, in her normal life, and she has been able to practice that for over 100 years. She's very old. And then, you can think of what is her identity and how does she perceive herself and things like that. But even though she could be anyone, you don't know who Mystique is, at any given point, she still has to balance all these risks and all these limitations. It's fun.
That's where it's really fun too with shape-shifting, is what are your limits? Because I think, and we've talked about the power fantasy, but that is a really fun thing to explore, is all right, is there a time limit, or is there like you said, maybe it's a mass limit, so they can only shapeshift as far as they have mass. Maybe their shapeshift is extremely powerful or extremely slow. So how do they have to adjust to that? Or if it is really fast and fluid, maybe there's times where it's almost too fast, and if they lose concentration, then suddenly they're shape-shifting into something else. So yeah, no, I like what you said about Mystique's limits. I think that's cool.
Can I throw one more out there
Yeah,
for
sure.
a character? Clayface.
Oh, I watched the old Batman the Animated Series, and his episode where he's got like all the screens, and he's shifting too fast between all the different forms. Oh, that was really cool.
Yeah. His whole thing that he explains is that he can... Changing for him is like tensing a muscle, and you can only hold it for so long, no matter what. Mm-hmm. So he can never like just be a person. Yeah. He always has to default to this like mound Monster. Of like walking clay, so to speak. Yeah. And so, his tragedy comes with wanting to... He could be anything, but never for long, and he can never turn back into himself.
Yeah.
And but he can take any shape. He also can take on the properties of other things, because he can just form metal. Yeah. He can do almost anything he wants. And there is one... Okay, so...
You're like, I got another one.
So well in the series.
Yeah.
No, it's just an extension... This is a big spoiler. There's an episode of Batman the Animated Series, the New Adventures, where he's got like really young Robin, Tim Drake Robin.
Okay.
And they meet this little girl, and the little girl seems to be like running from some kind of danger.
Oh, this episode.
Yeah. Do you know about this episode?
I'm not sure. Keep going. I'm curious anyways.
Okay. So like the entire time you're like, what's the threat? And they're running away from Clayface the whole time. And you start to find out that the girl's like answers to certain things don't really make a lot of sense.
Wasn't she?
And then you
Clayface?
find out
or an aspect
she was a
of
piece of Clayface.
Yeah.
She was a literal piece that he
off.
made so that he could try to like get Batman, but she gained her own identity.
Yeah.
And eventually she had to be taken back into Clayface, and it was really, really painful.
Yeah.
That series just did such a good job with exploring really complex and dark themes.
Oh yeah, like Hardak. Remember Hardak?
Not off the top of my head.
He was a supercomputer. Hardak was Hardak was an acronym, but that computer was making robot duplicates of people that were identical. And then you had an entire episode where Batman was missing memories until you find out that wasn't Batman at all. And that version of Batman is just trying to like find his own identity and ends up like fighting the computer itself. Masters. I can't. This is what... I'm sorry, kids. Your generation missed out on that, but you can go watch it because there's so many ways to watch it now.
This is true.
Just find it.
If you're sick of Paw Patrol and Copaganda, you can go watch that instead. So
Also, that version of Batman is the best one. Yeah, but this is not a Batman podcast. Anyway, there's Clayface and there's Beast Boy. And
I mean, you're talking to a superhero here, so I'm not surprised that we got on superheroes for a bit.
No, you both are. I think it's great that came up, because I know Libra knows so much about that stuff. And I'm just sitting here like, my example is Nimona, which is very topical, and she's always red. Nimona. That's what I have to contribute. So
no, she was awesome.
No, I know.
They did such a good job
I love
with
her. They really did. And I love how she like compared like holding forms to like holding in a sneeze.
Yeah.
Of like, eventually it has to come out, and it's like, you know what, I vibe with that. I really do.
No,
so
but
I guess then,
and I love
sorry, go ahead.
I love her powers, and I love how they explored it, and the animation is just so satisfying to watch.
Yeah,
her rhino form's got like a bounce to it that's really fun.
I'm so glad that they were able to salvage that
yes.
from Disney shutting down Blue Sky, because it would have been criminal to never see that on the screen. And don't get me wrong, I love the actual graphic novel that Indy Stevenson did. And I really love the ending that one has, but I'm glad that they changed it for the movie, because I especially think in the cultural moment it was something that was very necessary, and I'm really happy with what we got.
It's got a really strong message of hope, and I think that's really important, especially for kids.
Yeah, no, 100%. I want to make sure we had time to get to this topic too, because we've kind of skirted around it at the beginning, but I know that in terms of your artistic output, you've basically stuck exclusively to creating safe for work or transformation content versus TF content. And so I'm curious to kind of like dig a little more into that and understand like what led you to focus on that as being like your main kind of output.
A lot of it is personal comfort. I very rarely watch like R movies. I'm still like an active Christian and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it has just been personal comfort. It has been interesting. As I joined the community, I learned how kink adjacent I was, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I learned about this whole other side of it. And I think a lot of it has been kind of coming to terms with, okay, where are my boundaries at? And what am I comfortable drawing? What am I not comfortable drawing? And like I have my own kinks, but for me personally, it's like that's between me and my partner. That's not really for anybody else. And so I think especially when I'm drawing something for somebody else, I mentioned this before, but like if somebody gets off on my drawings, great for them. I'm glad they enjoy it in that way, but it's very much like I don't really need to know about it. I'm also I'm also the person who, like, if there's a sex scene on screen, I'd rather it black out. Like, I don't want to see somebody else's sex personally. I don't mind that they imply that it's there. I don't mind that there's like all this sort of stuff, but it's very much like I'd rather my stuff be with me and my partner, and then I'd rather, for me, I guess it's more of a personal thing, and so like I don't want to be involved in somebody else's. That
makes sense to me. I imagine then that like the more not safe for work mindset that many approach TF with in general, like you've definitely bumped up against within the space a number of times. And it sounds like you've kind of found like a way to sort of navigate it. But have there ever been any moments where it's like you're like questioning those boundaries, at least internally, or is it always like been very like, no, I have a very strong sense of like where they are, and I don't have any interest in kind of exploring beyond that?
I've had certain boundaries that I think I had from the start. Like for one of mine, it's I don't want to do nudity, so I've in my terms of service I have Animorphs rules. If it's skin tight, it stays on. But there have been times, and I will say, like, my commissioners, my clients have been so awesome. I've often had a lot of people, like, they'll ask, hey, do you do, like, pull toys? Do you do inanimate objects? And I never considered it before, and so I had to think about it. It's like, oh, how do I feel about this? Am I comfortable with this? And if I'm not comfortable with it, a lot of them are like, okay, just wanted to check. And I'm like, thank you for understanding. Thank you. Like, I'm flattered that you reach out to me for that stuff, and that you're okay with the fact that maybe I'm not comfortable with it. So I've been very lucky with a lot of the people, especially the people that have commissioned me. I have found in the comments sections on some of my work, and usually they're also pretty good, but sometimes I'll get, it's like, so is there a nude alt? And it's like, no.
You've activated him again. Yeah, go for it.
Why can't you? Why? It's always more. It's more. You wonder why I haven't done art or posted anything in 6 months, or really like try to do anything.
Yeah,
that's why I couldn't hold the Patreon down.
Yeah,
not the way I originally intended. It's just, there's just so much. Let me validate you further, if it matters at all. I draw porn for myself, and I have drawn porn for money, but I always hated it when people tried to get me into their fantasy.
Yes,
and it's what I refer to as horny posting, where as they're describing the thing, it's almost as if they're trying to foreplay me into the idea of it. And I hate it. I think that people should be, I think that in adult spaces, people should be able to express adult things, all right? And there is a way to do it, but, you know, when we're just talking business, and you're getting like steamy under your shirt and everything, like, stop. Stop that.
Yeah.
Stop that right now.
Because you wouldn't walk into a business off the street and start doing that. Like, you wouldn't. Like,
there's actually a really funny tweet I saw. I think it's in the Shifter Discord that I joined. Somebody mentioned it's like having like a regular commissioner is like having a sugar daddy, and then they had this like picture of the person. It's like, draw my character, and they're handing them money, and somebody responded, they're like, did you just make commissioning into a kink?
Yes, I saw that tweet.
It was very funny.
It was very funny. Yeah. And like, hey, if people really like commissioning and people and supporting artists, I mean, I very much think that's a good thing. You know, there's many things that can be said about the ethics of whatever capitalism, but I think one of the most ethical forms of consumption is commissioning like community people to create something for you. I think that's like one of the best ways that you can engage with like, supporting artists. It's just, I wish that people would understand sometimes that there's also healthy boundaries that artists wish to have that you should be working to validate instead of challenge all the time. And unfortunately, some people don't really seem to know the difference between the two, and that's unfortunate. But
if you're too ashamed to say it out loud to just anybody, why are you going to do this when you're approaching somebody for a commission?
Exactly.
Well,
like you're like.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and honestly too, like, you're welcome to ask. Like you that's how you learn about boundaries, is you ask, and then you find out where those boundaries are. But it's learning to respect that. And it's like, if somebody says no, then you need to leave it at that. Like, and if you keep commenting and you keep pestering and asking for stuff, that's where it crosses the line into, I think, a parasocial relationship might be a good description of it.
I think that would be,
I think it's harassment.
Fair.
I just think it's straight up harassment. Parasociality is when they start to really assume things about you, and a few people have done that to me. A few clients.
I've had it on occasion, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm a big artist now. Where I almost mark it as like a level of accomplishment. It's like,
Yeah. Especially when you have to start making rules because you have like the one experience.
Yes.
Which by now I'm sure you have several rules that if you wanted to, you could say it's because of this, because of this, because of this.
Yeah.
No, and I have been fairly lucky, is that I've had some very kind people. There's been the odd one-off, but for the majority is really positive, which has been really...
That's really good.
Hey, I'm glad to hear it, because it's tough for artists, and it's tough to be a woman on the internet of any kind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're having a overall positive experience, good.
Yeah.
I've heard too many horror stories, and I got horror stories right now. Every time.
Also, I think I give off a weird enough vibe that they don't even bother trying with me for some of the stuff.
Man, I wish. I guess if you don't like tee-hee and sprinkle stars on all your notes, then you're not going to be approached that way by that many people.
See, I do that and I get approached in that way, but I'm not a woman, so.
Well, I don't know. I'm so flatly whatever, but I've been approached by several people.
That's true.
Even like a few weeks ago, I got into something. I went and I ranted. And I argued with somebody, and I insulted them, and I left, and afterward they're like, "Hey, handsome." I'm like, "What are you?"
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's wild. Oh man. But I guess then, like, when it comes to that often emphasis with like not safe for work stuff in these spaces, how do you have any thoughts, I guess, based on everything we said? Do you have any thoughts on how you feel people who are like more interested in like the not safe for work side should approach discussions around transformation when it comes to safe for work settings? Because I think some people have a problem in separating what they like about TF from like a sexual perspective versus what they like about it from an aesthetic perspective, and don't always have the right ways to then formulate those thoughts into a way that actually works for like the majority of people.
That's really fair, yeah. Ooh, I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I think respecting, like, if there is like a not safe for work channel, then keeping the explicit stuff over there. I think part of it, I think, is perspective taking. My husband's a psychologist, so I get all the psychology terms from him. But learning that not everybody is into it for the same reasons that you are, I think, is really important. And respecting the fact that people might be getting something different out of it. And if you can respect that, and then I think you're golden.
Makes sense to me. Another thing, I'm glad to hear it repeated. I'm going to keep making sure it gets repeated. Not everybody's into it at the same level. When I speak to artists that maybe either join my server or I just happen to start a conversation with, I end up asking them, like, okay, so you make this stuff, but, on what level? Mm-hmm. What are you making it for? Why? Are you just doing it for money? Some people just do it for money. Yeah. That's generally fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
But again, it's like the assumptions. The assumptions get made sometimes, and that needs to be cut out whenever possible.
And if you don't know, ask a question. Show, sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, as you've said before, Libra, on this show, like, every interaction online is a real interaction. There's a real person in each of those situations, and you shouldn't just be acting differently because you're quote-unquote online and it's quote-unquote not real. Like, these are all real interactions you're having with real people.
Everything is IRL. Yeah. Everything is real life. This is a vector of communication for people. It's all real.
Unless it's a chat bot, then do whatever you want, but just make sure you're actually talking to a bot, not a person.
Hey, some people just really want to marry their chatbot.
You can bully AI. That's always ethical. But the.
I think it's I always think that it's good to remind people that everybody's in it for different reasons.
Yeah.
And to let them explore however they want. Yeah. To go back again to the level of entitlements, I used to know an artist who had a particular Sona, and they made a new one, was like, hey, this is the new me, and got a serious note from somebody saying how concerned they are that they're going with this new form, and that it's not really them, and it doesn't reflect them, and that they're making a huge mistake. And it's like, wow.
Yeah, literally.
Absolutely, for real.
It is ludicrous. The level of entitlement is incredible.
Speaking of entitlement stories, I've had one person specifically, and I had to block them on multiple platforms, which was a first for me. They didn't like the way that I drew snarly faces, because they, I think, and they actually did apologize for it like a couple years later, but...
Yeah.
I think they had a fear of, like, aggressive animals. So they were like, can you make sure that your animals are always, like, smiling or happy? And I'm like, I like to draw smiley faces. I'm sorry. Like, if you don't like my art, that's fine. Don't watch it. But don't tell me how to draw my art.
Okay, I'm sorry. That is one of the most ludicrous things I've ever heard. Can you make sure that all your animals are smiling in your pictures?
Or
just for me,
calm.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, I like the snarly. The snarly is like half the fun. Learning how to draw.
Draw your own stuff.
Yeah.
Do it yourself.
Yeah, that's when it's like, come on, guys.
Do it yourself. Well, that's not a reasonable request. Oh my God! How did anybody do? Oh. Anyway, rage. Yeah. There's so many examples of entitlements. Yeah. And they're all absolutely unhinged.
They are, yeah.
Hey, this Animal Crossing character I identify as my husband, so can you pack them up from your island? Because you're not treating them well, and I need them on my island.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think everyone was losing their minds when the most recent Animal Crossing came out. Just examples of that are happening all over the place, and it was like, oh my God, it's great that you love Raymond, but I'm sorry, that's not a reasonable request.
It's a digital character. If you want Raymond, you can get him in your own game. Like, leave me alone.
Don't tell me how to interact with him in mine.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Examples of this stuff.
Yeah, so many examples. We did get some audience questions that I wanted to make sure we got to. And the first one came from Max Velocity, and it was related to the live episode we did at Anthrocon with Angerbot and ABCD. And so Max was saying that one of the question askers in the live episode mentioned the idea of transformation insurance, which could then naturally lead to transformation insurance fraud, where maybe there's a guy out there who's TFing you for money so that you can get a huge payout. So thought-provoking question is, what do you think TF fraud prevention would look like, and would that be in-universe TF gatekeeping?
I saw a fun sequence that my friend Sarah Phil did, where if you put on this mask at a convention, then you'd start transforming it, and they did an Andalite piece. And the person's like, well, if you want to turn back into human, you're going to have to pay for the whole set. And they're like, actually, I like my body. Bye. And it was a fun little subversion. I think if you're going to play with that, then it's also fun to play with ideas. It's like, all right, you're going to scam me? Fine, I'm going to scam you right back. or like the trolling the system sort of thing.
No, I dig that. I think it would be a lot of fun to do. You were jumping to say something.
I think that if you're going to try to prevent something like fraud, you are going to be gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Gatekeeping has a very negative slant, but sometimes there's a place for it, and that's a form of gatekeeping. If you want to prevent fraudulent behavior, I mean, I'm wondering, like, the most grim version I could think of it is like if your loved one was changed, it's kind of like life insurance. Are they gone? Do they cease to exist? I wonder about that.
Yeah.
Then you'd have to treat it like that. But, I mean, people try to defraud all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I feel like anyone who is, like, engaging in, like, quote-unquote TF fraud prevention would, like you said, I think that is inherently gatekeeping. I also feel like it very much depends on, like, the people in question, because there's definitely folks who would be like, I'm going to get this TF insurance and then deliberately try to, like, get transformed so I can get the payout. But then there's also people who are like, I'm just going to get transformed and that's the end of that, and I don't really care about the payout. And so I feel like you'd have a lot of very different approaches depending on, like, what sort of groups you'd get in. And maybe there'd be multiple companies with different approaches. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe there's the strict ones and the laissez-faire ones or something,
here's a basic way to try to defraud. If we don't go with the grim, like, you're a pig now and the you that was is gone now, so you're essentially dead, you turn into, like, a monster person. Oh, okay, here's a simple one.
Mm-hmm.
With Monster Musume, they have, like, the mermaid girl, and when the mermaid girl was introduced to the cast in this particular guy's house, he woke up to an entirely huge room with a absurdly large and deep swimming pool. So the idea would be, if you turned into merfolk or something like that, you would need the payout to be able to make your living space. Yeah. And
that's
that would
good, actually.
So you could try to defraud the company and be like, look, I'm this, I'm that, and then like how after you're done with the approval process, you went to get changed back or something. Like, oh, you said this was irreversible, but here we see you not a merfolk.
Yeah.
Why are you a wolfkin or something like that?
Maybe I just wanted an indoor swimming pool, and this was my way to get it for free.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that would be wrong.
You've already seen people playing with the idea of, like, reversible or irreversible potions, so it's like I could see that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Fitting right into there.
Well, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be claiming that this is going to be your life going forward, and you need this money, and then you don't,
then there'd be an interesting. I'm wondering, like, would you have to have, like, people go undercover and TF themselves to investigate these TF fraud scams? I don't know. I feel like there's a lot you can play with
it would have to be the vectors for which things would be done. Is there a black market for being changed?
Yeah.
Is it individuals who undergo a process? Is it spellcasters? Is it academics? Is there a guild? Are there organizations, companies, all kinds of things like that? Yeah, whatever it is.
That's what I could see in, like, a high fantasy setting where you have a guild for. It's like somebody polymorphed me, and how do you?
Yeah.
Who do you address for redress of grievances? Have a guild of wizards that
you need
fixes
to go to, like, a guild. Yeah, that would be cool. I think there's a lot of ways you could do it.
You can. So I like the question. It is unfortunately too broad, I think, to get the proper answer. But I will say that, yes, it's gatekeeping because you're trying to keep people from doing fraud. And people who don't want to commit to something to defraud things should be kept out from the gate.
Yeah. The next question we have is from Other Burb, and Other Burb asks, what was your initial reaction towards making transformation art for the very first time?
You want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. I think it was excitement because it was like, I have this idea. I can create it. I can make it in the way that I like it. So I was very much that wish fulfillment, power fantasy. And especially if you've grown up with certain media, it's like, I can do it in the way that I want to see it now. And I haven't stopped.
Which is great.
Yeah.
I think for me, at least the first time I did like a photo manipulation, I think there was a part of me that was definitely like, wow, this is something I can do because I've like struggled with dysgraphia and therefore like doing it from like a traditional perspective. And there's another part of me that was like, wow, this sure has a lot of limitations. And so I think like one of the funny things was like, and I don't really do it much anymore, but when I did a lot of like TF writing back in the day, like the first time I wrote it, I was like, oh, this feels a lot more freeing because the boundaries that I have are not visual or like based in like how something looks in like a particular image. It's all based on my skill with writing and using words, and that felt like something that was a lot more straightforward. And I think I've definitely come to a point now, at least, where I feel like, my limits are very much just what I am in terms of my skill level right now, and those can be pushed as you like grow as an artist. But definitely the first time I made TF art, I was kind of more like, I'm seeing all the limitations almost immediately. I'm not sure how to feel about this. So I don't know if it was actually excitement, but I mean, I stuck with it, so, you know.
That, or I'm also picturing May from Turning Red when she's under the bed and starts doodling for the mermaid.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, you know, like...
I love that face.
Yeah, it's perfect.
First time I did it, I felt really weird, kind of ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
But more than anything, kind of overwhelmed because I felt like there was so much I didn't know, and that I knew it definitely wasn't going to be good enough or wasn't even going to be close to what I wanted to do. But thankfully, I don't think that feeling really lasted because my interest in the fact that I did it at all made me kind of keep pushing. So the incremental things that I kept trying eventually blew up into me making pretty much anything that I can grit my teeth and get through.
Nice.
If I have to. Sometimes it goes really smooth.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seemed overwhelming at the time because I have had a much worse self-esteem issue about my art, and it's better now. It's much better, but man, I felt like, oh, there's so much I don't know. What am I going to be making? How am I even going to be doing this? I'm going to hate this. And so that was like my first time, pretty much.
Fascinating.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's always interesting how like so many of our initial experiences with the creation of TF media is so varied, and I think it also speaks to the fact that like you can start from pretty much any basis if you have the dedication or perseverance or just plain stubbornment and you keep going with it. You can end up in a completely different headspace, and I think that's something that's really cool. You can transform your way of thinking about things.
It's real.
You know?
Real,
transformation is real. But yeah. And then the last question we have is from Stormy. And so she asks, what's the craziest, definitely not TF thing you've seen IRL? And so the example that she gave was, there's an area I work in where it's themed around visiting an ancient temple as part of a ride that allows you to communicate with and even have animal spirits possess you and cause you to act like an animal while riding the ride. So the question is, what's the craziest, oh yeah, this totally isn't TF sort of thing you've seen IRL?
I'm trying to think about that. I feel like there's just a bunch of different things that will advertise that they're going to change your life somehow. And it's like, we're walking around, it's just like, oh, look at that, they have that thing, oh, come in here and be transformed, transform your life, clothing transforms
hair transformation.
You. We got a toilet seat where the brand was literally transformed.
Yeah, transform.
Like, what are we changing here? With a toilet seat. And
I was a former person.
So you see, there you go. I can't really pick one because, again, you know, it's weird because, like, I think that there's plenty of people who have the actual brain rot, which I can find obnoxious. But it really is easy to see.
Oh, it absolutely is.
If this concept of changing is something that is really that you're really all about, you are going to have a hard time not finding it.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'll go with the toilet seat. That
I think
just
that's a
showed
good
up
one.
at our door. We didn't pick it. We asked for replacements, and then I looked at the box, and I'm like, oh my god, come look at this.
Yeah,
You're like,
it's
oh,
just,
that's
it was
perfect.
too perfect.
Yeah.
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 The one that actually came into my head, I was thinking about quick changes in theater. How frequently do they change costumes? Do they change looks and styles? And it's really cool because they'll walk off stage, and seeing some of the behind the scenes, you actually see like how they're like doing, as they're walking, they're changing an outfit, or like some of these outfits they'll like take off or remove one part and it changes into something else, and then they pop on stage and they're a different character, and it's like, holy cow, that is skilled.
It is. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
I love seeing that stuff, and as someone who used to do a spot of acting, I love how versatile people can be in terms of like just like leaving one mental headspace and entering another and assuming that role. I always think that's really cool.
Puppetry too.
I think if I had to pick, absolutely. I think if I had to pick an example, again, I guess because I've had this concept on my brain a lot for the past few months, I find that a lot of the ways in which like things marketed related to fitness are often very like, oh yeah, that's totally not TF. Like, you know, like you're getting like, I don't know, like a supplement or whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, unlock your inner beast or whatever. It's like, come on, guys, like really, like what are we doing here? Like you're not fooling anyone. Or like, you know, like, yeah, this is gonna make like, you know, like, you know, you're gonna have like a complete shift in how you think about fitness. I'm like, okay, jock TF, all right, okay, I get it, okay, all right. But this is, I think, because just I've been on that kick for a lot recently. I feel like that is one of those things that is something that just pops out at me all the time now, and I just can never not unsee it, I guess, especially just given it's an interest of mine too. So like, yeah, maybe that's a little bit of the brain rot speaking, but yeah, I just see it everywhere now. So
yeah, it's fun. There's Monster.
Yeah, Monster is a big one.
Monster, like you drink Monster. Well, come on, man.
Yeah, like what else am I supposed to draw from this conclusion? Like you guys had to know.
Yeah, that too. It's a ubiquitous theme. Look, changing your life, changing you, changing.
My brain rot is animals, so that's what I'm seeing everywhere all the time. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you can see that.
There's so much of it everywhere, especially in, like the advertising.
Tellus commercials.
And, like, you know. Yeah, exactly. I deal with like Salesforce in my real life job, and their mascot is a literal furry. Like, what am I supposed to take away from this, guys? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Anyways.
Whatever, man.
But yeah, those are all the audience questions that I had. I don't know if you had any questions for us potentially.
What made you start this podcast? Like, and is there any artists that you've met that's like you've kind of geeked out a little bit?
Oh yeah. I guess like to answer the, you know, how it started, very like Cliff Notes version. There were other TF podcasts that had either been going on in the past or like were going but very slowly at the time, and one of the things that I always bemoaned was the fact that like we didn't have some sort of like weekly TF podcast within the fandom, because it has always felt like, you know, oh, there's all these people who are into transformation coming from a variety of different backgrounds. How is it that no one's really on like the daily podcast grind from a TF perspective? It seemed so strange to me that didn't exist. And, you know, having made over 100+ episodes now, I know why. It's because it's really, really difficult. And it is a lot of time and effort. Yeah, to do it well. Yes, to do it well, it is a lot of time and effort.
Look,
and
to be very transparent, every single time one of these gets posted, there are hours sunk into this.
Hours upon hours.
Sometimes it's way less hours, but it's always hours.
Yeah.
You know, because we have heard a few that are just pretty much recorded Discord calls.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, damn, this sounds bad, this looks bad, and it's boring.
Yeah.
And it's and a lot of the boredom also has to do with the fact that it's not paced because it's not edited.
Yeah, there's like big gaps of air, and like, you know, it's like I don't know where this conversation's going. So to make something like this, yeah, it's like it's really difficult from a time perspective, and like especially with the format that we have. I mean, we oftentimes are having new guests on, so there's like, you know, how do you find a guest? How do you like initiate a conversation? Find they're interested. How do you formulate the questions? I mean, you know, you just saw kind of of that process from your end, and it's a lot of work. So I think the idea when it came to me was really like, I really liked Double Helix, which was the transformation podcast that Anger Boda and ABCD used to do with some other folks like Fuego. And I really wanted to do something that was kind of in that vein, but like on a weekly basis. And that was just kind of where we went from there. And then I guess the other question was, oh my gosh, I forgot the other part of the question that you asked.
Any guests you've had that you've like really geeked out about?
Yes.
Maybe behind the scenes, or maybe with them, or.
Oh yeah. I mean, David Mattingly obviously is like the very easy answer and immediate answer. I've gotten to chat with a few folks that I really looked up to from an artistic perspective and influenced my artistic development. So I'd say one of the ones that jumps out for me is talking to Foxy, because a lot of her art was very formative to me. I did a lot of photo manipulations that were actually based off of pieces that she had done back in the day.
Oh, cool.
Like, you know, many years removed, but like still, like I was like, I want to do an adaptation of this because this was an image that really influenced me at the time. And now I feel like maybe I'm at the skill level where I could depict that from a visual perspective. So like, definitely her, and like definitely like a number of other people on this podcast that I've like looked up to over the years. And I'm just very thankful that all of them have been so kind and generous with their time and like coming to talk with us and like, you know, really sharing their insights, because I think the community is enriched by getting to hear from people from a variety of different walks of life across a variety of different ages and genders and perspectives and you know, ethnicities and all that stuff. So
it's good to know that this stuff doesn't form just because somebody really, really thought about it hard and then it happened.
yeah.
It's a lot of experience, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, and sometimes it's even a lot of grief.
Yeah.
The victories aren't always there for most people, and sometimes the victory is, look, I made this and I decided to share it.
Yeah.
As for people that I geeked out for, like David Mattingly, of course, Angela Quinton as well, because Angela Quinton is one of the few people that I feel can write a really good werewolf story. Because I've said it before and I'll say it again, I generally don't really like werewolves, and what I really don't like is werewolf media. And she went ahead and she made something that I cared about and that I felt for, and it was short, and it was so good, and I'm like, yes, thank you for doing this kind of stuff. I love this. Another one was Lemon Font. The Lemon Font is like ultra kink, lots of that. And the reason I found Lemon Fonts but the thing about Lemon Fonts is that I don't really like most of the kinks that are done by Lemon Font. I don't really like, but the stories are really good. If I give you the premise, I swear, the most famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, and this one is a real example. I said, people could, for instance, joke about, the idea of turning into a clown as a kink, right? And people are like, man, that's stupid, that's dumb, that's weird. I'm like, I know a good story.
He showed it to me and I stood corrected. I was like, yeah, that's a good story.
I'm like, look at this. Like, it's creative. It is silly, and it's outlandish,
and it's got heart,
and it has exactly.
Well, I mean, people watch comedies; they don't just watch horror. So I think there's audience for everything. Yeah,
but it's the idea that you can have porn that can also like you can actually take something away from.
Yeah, that it has an emotional resonance to it.
Yeah, so I'm like, clown stuff, not for me, but this one, I want to see what happens.
Yeah, I care about the characters.
I actually care about the characters, and sometimes it's nice, but otherwise it's like, oh no, what's going to happen to Nichols now? What is this new thing that's going to come out about her? Also, like in one comic, it's like she's accepted, and then another one she gets proposed to, and then another one it's about her shame, and that's expressed in a very creative way. So, like, yeah, I thought that to talk to somebody like that was, like, really interesting, too. I'm missing other people because there's been, like, 100 episodes.
There's so many. I'll just mention one other person because I think he doesn't get the flowers that he always does. I think Doran TF, who is obviously a very close friend of ours, is someone who does a really good job with the stories that he writes, and I feel like he just deserves such a bigger base of like people who pay attention to the stuff that he does than he gets right now. And I think that that's just because sometimes people don't have good taste, but also sometimes people don't actually find his stuff. And I just think he's a really incredible person in terms of the thoughtfulness that he puts into his pieces. And his and my like interests don't always necessarily align, but I always know if I'm going to read a story from him that it's going to be thought provoking and also good.
Yeah.
So.
It's just good. Like again, same. Like I read some of his stuff and I saw the subject, and I'm like, this isn't for me. But I read it, I'm like, this was done well.
Yeah.
This is somebody who knows what they like and actually absorbed it and learned how to play with it. As you said at the beginning, learning the rules to break them.
Yeah.
In this case, he doesn't really break anything, but you know how it is. Oh.
Explore the
It's okay.
limitations.
Explore the limitations, but also just really I guess bring something that he wants to see more of, because it's really cool when you can tell that there's somebody who likes to fixate on the changes because that's their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, let me make this interesting.
Yeah.
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 No, absolutely.
So,
cool.
there you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Like, I've really enjoyed this conversation and getting to like chat with you about all this stuff. If people are looking to find your stuff online, where can they find you?
I'm pretty much on most of the social medias. I'm Wheatart on Tumblr, Twitter, Blue Sky, for Affinity, DeviantArt, and I do technically have a Facebook page, but I think the other ones are probably more common.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
you did the best thing for you and made yourself easy to find.
Yeah.
And before I forget, I have one last question. What did you end up deciding on the pool toy front? Was that something that went on your yes list or your no list?
I think it went on my no list. Just
Understandable.
comfort for, especially inanimate objects where you don't have any. I'm trying to think of what to call it.
Agency?
Yeah. And you have no control over anything. I decided it's like it's interesting, and I've also seen it's not all kink related. Like there's some stuff where it's just for fun, but I was like, I think that's one that if and I think with that boundary specifically, I think it ended up being it's like if I say yes to that, then I'm going to have more and more and more requests for stuff that I'm less comfortable with. So even if it's kind of a middle ground, I think I set that rule so that it's like, okay, that way. Same with the clothes, honestly. That's why I don't do bursting clothes, is it's like...
Yeah.
I don't mind the bursting clothes. Like, you've seen some really cool ones in media, but it's like, if I set that hard rule, then I'm not going to have anybody asking me to be bursting into full nudity, so...
Seeing how you have to do this for a living, you'd rather be as comfortable with it as possible while you're having to put up with it.
Yeah. And
I
I genuinely
I
enjoy
that.
creating art for other people, but I think, setting those boundaries where it's enjoyable to me and it's enjoyable to them, and then I'm not doing anything that's already making me uncomfortable or squeamish, I think helps it stay enjoyable.
No.
Oh, yeah.
No,
and,
absolutely.
And it can really suck. Because again, with all the stuff I'm willing to draw, now I've also had to learn to say no.
Yes.
Not that I couldn't say it before, but I had to learn how to do it faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Faster and clearer.
Yeah. It's a skill. But I just as someone who loves pool toys, I put a pin in that mentally, and the neuron had been activated, so I wanted to follow up on it. But that was all I had.
You gotta make yourself some of your own pool toy stuff.
That's okay. I already do. So
look, people got to see your vision. You think that I'm doing this stuff because I wanted to get paid? No, I needed to see what I needed to see. I had to think of the third way of doing doing like the snake tail thing and like other things because I'm like, man, this don't look good and this don't look good, but I want it to be what makes sense in my head. So you got to do your pool toy stuff.
I do. Listen, my lizard brain is just focused on Shop TF right now, but soon.
For now, you do that thing.
Yeah.
You gotta have your hyperfixations, and then you gotta bounce between them. Yeah.
Exactly. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on again. I really appreciate you giving us your time and like your thoughtful answers. And thank you everyone for listening. I hope that y'all had as wonderful a time listening as we did recording it. And in the meantime, I hope that everyone stays hydrated because it is very hot out there in many parts of the world.
Yeah,
I hope that you continue to get some good rest. Get some good rest because I sure haven't and I need to fix that. Drink water. It's always important. Keep an open mind and stay TFy.
You drink water like 3 times.
Yeah, that's true. I did.
Also, Nimona is berserk.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.